There is a very specific, unforgiving kind of quiet that settles into a house at about 3 in the morning. If you are sitting there watching this and you are somewhere past your mid-60s or well into your 80s, you probably know exactly the silence I'm talking about. It's a heavy, judging, quiet. It's the time of night when you realize that your body is no longer just a vessel that carries you through the world without complaint. It's become a demanding roommate, one that requires constant negotiations and never respects your boundaries. I'm Brenda. I am 102 years old. That isn't a typo or an exaggeration. I've outlived my original hips, several brands of my favorite tea that they just stopped making, and the warranties on every single appliance in this house. I live alone, I bake my own bread, and last night my head hit the pillow at 10 in the evening and I didn't open my eyes again until the sun came up. But I'm not telling you this to brag about my constitution. I'm telling you this because for a very long, very dark decade of my life, I was essentially a ghost haunting my own hallways. I belonged to that vast, exhausted, invisible army of older folks who spend their nights wandering in the dark. You know the drill. You go to bed feeling completely drained, hoping for a solid stretch of rest. But a few hours later, your eyes snap open. There's that familiar, heavy pressure low in your abdomen. You look at the glowing numbers on the clock. It's 2:15 in the morning. You try to bargain with yourself. You think, if I just lie completely rigid, maybe the feeling will pass and I can drift back off, but it never passes. So you sigh, throw back the covers, put your feet on the chilly floorboards, and make the familiar trek down the hall. You brush it off at first. You tell yourself it's just a normal part of putting a lot of miles on the odometer. But when one trip turns into 2, and 2 trips stretch into 3 or 4, something fundamental inside your spirit begins to fracture. When you don't sleep for years on end, you aren't just tired. Tired is what you feel after pulling weeds in the garden. This is a total erosion of the self. It chips away at your grace, your memory, and your courage. You drop your keys. You snap at the mailman for no reason. And then the darkest, quietest terror creeps in. You wonder if your mind is finally slipping away, if the fog is permanent. I remember sitting in this very armchair when I was 86, staring at the pattern on the rug, feeling so incredibly delicate that I was afraid to drive my car out of the neighborhood. I felt like I was dissolving into the background of my own life. So I did what any reasonable person is trained to do. I made an appointment at the medical clinic. I sat in a waiting room that smelled faintly of rubbing alcohol until a very polite, very hurried young doctor called my name. He was a sweet kid, honestly. He looked like he should still be carrying a backpack to high school, but he had a medical degree and very expensive shoes. The problem is, he was given exactly 12 minutes to unravel the mysteries of a body that had been operating for nearly a century. He listened to my heart. He checked my blood pressure. And then, because his time was up and the waiting room was full, he pulled out a pen and wrote a prescription for a little pill designed to suppress an overactive system. I took those pills religiously. Do you want to know what happened? My mouth became so dry I felt like I'd eaten a bowl of sand. I became so dizzy when I stood up that I had to hold on to the walls. But at 3 in the morning, the pressure was still there, and I was still walking down that dark hallway. I went back to the clinic. They gave me a different pill. That one gave me a throbbing headache and did absolutely nothing for my bladder. That was the exact moment the illusion shattered for me. I realized that the medical system isn't evil. They aren't hoarding secret cures to keep us dependent. They're just fundamentally overwhelmed and designed to manage your symptoms, not to investigate the architecture of your daily life. If they see a puddle on the floor, their job is to hand you a mop. They simply don't have the time to look up at the ceiling and figure out where the rain is coming from. I might have just accepted my miserable fate if I hadn't watched what happened to my oldest friend, Joseph. Joseph and I went back to 1968. He was a force of nature, a man who used to run a local hardware store, always had a joke ready, and never took nonsense from anyone. But right around his 88th birthday, the bad nights came for him too. He started waking up 4 or 5 times a night. Joseph was a fighter, so he tried to battle it. He completely stopped drinking any fluids after 2 in the afternoon, which just left him terribly dehydrated and gave him muscle cramps. He choked down bitter herbal teas, took handfuls of extracts, and wore strange compression garments he ordered from a catalog. Nothing worked. I watched a vibrant, capable man slowly dismantle before my eyes. It wasn't a catastrophic illness that took his independence. It was the absolute, crushing weight of thousands of fragmented nights. He stopped working in his garage because he was too dizzy to stand at the workbench. By the time he turned 91, Joseph moved into a managed care facility. He didn't fall and break a hip. He moved there because he was so thoroughly, bone-deep exhausted that he no longer trusted himself to be alone in his own house. He surrendered his home, his routine, and his fierce pride, all because he couldn't get 4 straight hours of sleep. I visited him in that clean, sterile room, and the dull defeat in his eyes absolutely broke my heart. I drove home that afternoon, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white, and I made a quiet vow to the universe. I wouldn't let the dark nights steal my life the way they stole his. I stopped looking for a magic potion and started looking at the simple, mechanical engineering of the human body. I treated my own aging vessel like a puzzle that needed solving, and eventually I uncovered a truth that was so beautifully, ridiculously simple, it made me want to laugh out loud. It wasn't a failing organ, it wasn't a disease, it was just basic plumbing and physics. Here is what's actually happening inside your body on a daily basis. All day long, you are living a vertical life. You are standing, sitting in chairs, walking to the mailbox. Gravity is constantly pulling everything in your body downward. When we're in our 30s and 40s, the veins in our legs are tight and resilient. They act like strong little elevators, pumping all the blood and fluid right back up to the heart without breaking a sweat. But when you pass 50, and certainly when you pass 80, those veins get a little weary. They stretch out. They lose their elastic snap. So, as the day goes on, microscopic amounts of water seep out of those tired veins and settle into the soft, spongy tissues of your lower calves and your ankles. You brush it off as a normal part of having a long day. But then the evening comes and you get into bed. You lie completely flat. Suddenly, the rules of gravity have changed. You're horizontal. All of that water that's been quietly hiding in your legs all day has absolutely no resistance anymore. It slowly starts seeping out of your leg tissues and flooding right back into your main bloodstream. Over the course of a few hours, your heart suddenly senses a massive, unexpected surge of extra fluid. It panics. It sends a frantic distress signal to your kidneys, telling them that the body is overloaded with water and they need to filter it out immediately. Your kidneys obediently kick into high gear. They process all that leg fluid. Your bladder fills up rapidly, and suddenly your eyes fly open in the pitch-black bedroom. It's 2:30 in the morning, and you're running to the bathroom. You think your bladder is weak. You think it's failing you, but it was just doing exactly what it was commanded to do. The problem was never your bladder. The problem was gravity and the stealthy fluid trapped in your lower legs. Once I finally understood this mechanism, the solution wasn't found at a pharmacy. It was found in my living room. I needed to drain my legs before I ever put my head on the pillow. I developed a daily routine that I haven't skipped in over 10 years. Around 5 in the evening, well before I start thinking about getting ready for bed, I lie down completely flat on this rug right here. I slide my hips up close to the sofa, and I put my lower legs up on the cushions. I make absolutely sure my heels are elevated noticeably higher than my heart. I lie there for about 30 to 40 minutes. I don't watch television. I just listen to some soft jazz or let the quiet wash over me. I let gravity do its heavy lifting. The fluid drains out of my calves while I'm fully awake. My kidneys process it, and I use the restroom before I ever put my nightgown on. I also added a tiny bit of movement to my mornings to wake up those tired veins. While my tea water is boiling on the stove, I hold onto the edge of the kitchen counter. I rise up firmly on my tiptoes, and I let my heels drop solidly back down to the floor. I do this 40 times in a row. It's a simple heel drop, but it forces those lazy calf muscles to squeeze and pump the stagnant blood upward, setting the circulation right for the rest of the day. And finally, I had to be brutally honest about what I was eating for dinner. Salt is a moisture magnet. If you eat a high-sodium meal at 6 in the evening, your tissues will fiercely hold on to that water, only to release it into your bladder at midnight. I strictly stopped eating salty, heavily processed food after my midday meal. I won't sit here and lie to you, pretending this was a miraculous overnight cure. The human body is incredibly stubborn, and it loves its established routines, even the destructive ones. The first week I tried this, I still woke up twice in the night. I almost threw in the towel. But I kept picturing Joseph sitting in that managed care facility, and I kept putting my legs up on the sofa. By the third week, I realized I had slept a solid 6-hour stretch. By the second month, the midnight hallway marches had entirely stopped. I had my nights back. I was sleeping deeply, dreaming vividly, and waking up with a mind that felt sharp and clear. But this is exactly where my story takes a very sharp turn, because fixing the mechanical plumbing of my body revealed a completely different, vastly more terrifying problem. I had my energy back. I was no longer a stumbling zombie, but I'd wake up at 7 in the morning. The house would be filled with beautiful morning light. I'd feel completely rested, and I'd realize I had absolutely no reason to pull the covers back. When you spend an entire decade just trying to survive your own exhaustion, you don't notice how incredibly empty your world has become. But when the mental fog finally clears, you look around and realize that society has quietly packed up and moved on without you. You're retired. Your children have their own demanding careers and families. Nobody is knocking on your door asking for your advice. You're warm, you're fed, you're safe, and you are utterly, completely unnecessary. I realized then that having a fully functioning, well-rested body is completely pointless if you don't have a compelling reason to steer it out into the world. I'd repaired the engine of the car, but I had absolutely nowhere to drive. And I'll share a piece of wisdom that living for over a century has carved into my bones. If you don't have a genuine purpose, your body will eventually manufacture a crisis just to have something to do. The profound loneliness and the corrosive feeling of being useless will rot you from the inside out much faster than any physical ailment ever could. I knew with absolute certainty that I had to find a way to matter again. It was terrifying. When you've been isolated for years, simply reaching out feels like trying to lift a boulder. But I started ridiculously small. I have a neighbor, a young, frantic single father who works odd hours. He has a 9-year-old daughter who spent a lot of time sitting on her front porch, looking bored and lonely while he was busy trying to keep their lives together. One Tuesday afternoon, I saw him looking completely overwhelmed, trying to fix a lawnmower, and I just walked over. I told him to send his daughter over to my house on Wednesday afternoons. I'm not a babysitter, and at my age, I'm certainly not going to chase a child around a playground. But that little girl came over, and suddenly, my deeply quiet house had a pulse again. I had to get up from my armchair to answer the door. I had to remember to buy lemonade. We sat at my kitchen table, and I dug out my old knitting needles. I started teaching her how to cast on, how to purl, how to fix a dropped stitch. She was clumsy, and I was rusty. But we laughed. It sounds so incredibly trivial, but that 1 hour of responsibility completely altered my biochemistry. I woke up the next morning with a tiny, flickering spark of intention. I had to find a better pattern for her. I had to be sharp. I built on that little spark. Once we finished her first terrible, lopsided scarf, I told her to invite a friend. Then I started making a few phone calls to other older folks in the neighborhood who I knew were sitting alone in their living rooms. I invited them over to drink the lemonade the girls didn't finish. The profound, undeniable truth about getting older is that the medical industry will gladly sell you 1,000 different expensive ways to merely extend your life, but they can't sell you a reason to actually live it. You have to build that with your own 2 hands. True meaning is the most potent medicine that exists on this earth. Being genuinely, undeniably useful to another living creature is the ultimate nutrient for the human soul. When you know that someone else is relying on you, even for something as small as teaching them how to knit or sharing a quiet cup of tea, your brain sends a powerful biological signal to your immune system and your nervous system. It tells your aging body to hold on, to stay strong, because there's still work left to be done. So if you're listening to my voice right now and you're exhausted, if you're fighting the long, dark nights, I want you to take care of the physical vessel. Put your legs up on the sofa. Do the heel drops in the kitchen. Watch your evening salt intake. Give your body the practical, mechanical respect it desperately deserves. Don't simply accept a pill when a shift in gravity is what you really need. But please, I'm begging you, don't stop there. Because a flawless night of sleep is entirely worthless if you don't have a morning worth waking up for. You're standing at a point in your life where you possess decades of accumulated resilience, dry humor, and hard-won wisdom. It's a tragedy to keep it locked inside a quiet, empty house. Find one person, one child, or one quiet neighbor this week who needs your attention and stubbornly offer it to them. Step outside your front door and figure out a way to become quietly, relentlessly useful again. Reclaim your nights with simple physics, but reclaim your days with genuine purpose. That's the actual secret to outliving your warranties. Thank you so much for listening.